Welcome everyone to another episode of CDI Live. My name is Felix Vargas. I am the CTO of security for CDI. And I want to welcome everyone. I know it's the holiday season, so we're probably all sort of driving around doing, last minute shopping. I want to wish you happy holidays. This is actually the fifth episode of CDI Live. We're looking to do these bi-weekly. We had initial conversations around the SASE rule changes for incident response from, for publicly traded organizations. We actually also talked about cyber insurance and what the implications are from a cyber insurance perspective in previous episodes. We had one on application security. And just the previous one that we had was actually on Microsoft, right? And all the updates and announcements from Ignite. And today, we're actually going to be discussing something that is near and dear to my heart, which is zero trust security. It plays a major role in our security go-to-market strategy for CDI. And with me, I have Bob McCouch, who is the Director of Networking and Security Architects at CDI. Bob, if you don't mind, introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here, Felix. Thanks for having me. So as mentioned, my name is Bob McCouch. I've been in my current role, which is now part of CDI, for the better part of 10 years, running the network pre-sales solutions architecture team. We deal with everything networking, network security for our customers, and work to develop solutions that meet their business needs and help set them up for success around technology of connectivity and networking. So myself, I've got about a little over 20 years of experience in the networking industry. Just hit my 10-year mark with a CCIE certification. So I've been doing this for a long time. I live outside the Philadelphia area, where I've spent the better part of my life. I love working in networking solutions. And I love working in this solutions integrator kind of environment where we get to help customers solve business problems through technology. So
Awesome.
Great to be here, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. And I was joking before we got on, is that you can never outdo Bob McCouch. Bob, is that a green screen behind you, all black? I think I need to.
No, I cheat. It's actually just a velvet backdrop that I set up.
Oh, okay. So is that a green screen? Okay, that's interesting.
You don't have to see all the clutter in my office,
Right. That makes sense. All right. So for today, right? So first of all, if you're joining live, like I said, thank you for joining. What we really appreciate is any sort of interaction. So if you have questions that you want addressed as we go through the content, by all means, right? And just to give you a preview of the things that we'll cover, we're going to delve into zero trust security. We'll define what zero trust security means at a high level. And it is, multifaceted. There's a lot of topics that are involved within zero trust security. We are going to double click on the network aspect of zero trust security and touch on things like SASE, NAC, network access control, maybe some micro-seg. We'll get into maybe IoT and OT, with the understanding that, these sessions are 30 minutes long. And, more than anything, we're sort of releasing these or coming out with this content to drum up conversation, right? And build community. So if you have questions, by all means, we're going to be monitoring the chat, making sure that we address those questions and get them answered. So to start, right?
I'm pretty sure we can cover the entire world of zero trust in 30 minutes, right, Felix?
Yeah, we can. All of it. But to start, let's just define zero trust at a high level, right? So there are three guiding principles to zero trust. The first is verify explicitly. The second is provide least privilege access. And the third is assume breach, right? So those are the guiding principles, and they can mean different things to different people. The way that I sort of describe it is, if I'm verifying explicitly, I'm going beyond the password, right? Like, we understand you have a password, but what is the context of your access? Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have all these things in place? Where are you coming in from? Yeah, I'm really taking in all the data that is coming in to establish a level of trust and then give you least privileged access to the backend resource that you need. And then I'm making sure that I'm continuously monitoring that in order to validate that you should have access to these things, right? And so there are a lot of different ways of doing that. And the definition itself is actually comprehensive across various aspects. So what is under the zero trust umbrella? So we have identity, which is a key component of it, right? We live in a world where the castle and moat approach won't work anymore. Pre-COVID, we were 5% work from home. We're now 60% work from home, which has really expedited are adoption of zero trust technology such as SASE, right? So identity is a new perimeter. That's a key element and something that is a trend, I would say, in a lot of the conversations that I'm in around, maturing from an identity perspective. Then we have device, right? So we need a device to do things for the most part, right? And so
Mhm.
what is the posture of that device? What kind of visibility do I have on that device? Is it a managed device? Is it not? And what context can we take from that device to allow that access, right? Then we have the network, which is what we're going to use to traverse, to access our applications. And that's what we're going to double click on today. And then we also have the application itself, and then the data, right? And ultimately, that's what we want to protect, right? Is the data itself. And then in order to have a proper zero trust strategy, you do need governance, visibility, and analytics, as well as orchestration and automation, right? So those 7 categories represent zero trust, and you could really categorize every single vendor in the ecosystem into one of those 7 categories, right? And so part of what we want to do is focus on simplification as much as possible and integration between the various vendors so that we can get to that zero trust outcome, right? A lot of the focus this year is around consolidation for various reasons. I always throw out there are 650,000 unfilled cybersecurity positions out, in the U.S. alone, 3.4 globally. We're only going to overcome that by we're not going to hire our way out of the problem, and we're going to overcome that by having better integration with our tools, orchestrating and automating as well, and AI. We can't have a conversation without mentioning AI, but that's also a critical component, of sort of bridging that gap, right? And so with that, Bob, network, which is your area of expertise, we spent a lot of time, you and I, talking about network security and what that means. What are some of the focus areas, right? Some of the trends that you're seeing in your conversations with customers around network security as it relates to zero trust?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, like you said, there's no one single angle you can take to zero trust, right? Because I mean, to me, zero trust is really about focusing on the data, right? At the end of the day, everything we're doing from a security perspective is generally to protect our data, right? Whether that's customer data, whether that's proprietary industry data, financial data, whatever it may be, right? That's what we're trying to protect with zero trust. So we're trying to move, the boundary of what we really consider to be trusted within the environment as close to the data as we can, which means that we move that boundary past what was traditionally considered to be a trust perimeter, that being the network, right? Whether you would get on a VPN connection, be it a remote office on a WAN or an MPLS, be in an office just with a LAN or a wireless connection. We always considered that to be the perimeter, right? You wanted to keep people out of the network. So we would worry quite a bit about network access control and things like that in order to try to limit who can access the network. In the zero trust world, I mean, you can't completely get away from having to manage and secure network infrastructure. But from a standpoint of accessing the data, we no longer consider that to be the gateway. That once you pass that, you've got open access to everything. So the big
Mhm.
trend, the big move that we're seeing, right, is a move toward more of a zero trust network architecture, or zero trust network access platform, right, where we've got some sort of policy engine that is continuously validating requests, verifying that the users who they say they are, the device is one that we know and have some level of control over, and that the request they're making is legitimate, and that they're at the right place and time and in the right situation to access that data, and doing that all on a continuous basis. And that's done through a combination, like you said, of identity and access management, multi-factor authentication, and enacting automated network access policy based on the outputs of that policy engine, right? So we're seeing that quite a bit from the user perspective, and that's where a lot of the SASE and SSE vendors come into play, is providing that policy engine and that ability to funnel traffic through that policy engine, or push that policy to ingress points in the network where we can apply that policy. And like you said, that's got to be something that's
Mhm.
explicitly and continuously verified for access, right? We need to check not just that a device was, not in a compromised state when it accessed the network, but it continues to be in an uncompromised state, as long as that
Right.
user's session or transaction is going on, right?
Right. So
So,
you
so that's
mentioned
a big element. The other big thing that we're seeing is a shift toward OT and IoT. Sorry, it looks like you wanted to jump in there. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thought on OT and IoT, and then I have a
Okay.
question.
So OT and IoT, right? So the Internet of Things, as well as operational technology versus information technology. Big shifts that we're seeing in the industry, right? We're putting network stacks, we're putting sensors, we're putting the ability to connect to the internet and AI and everything else into everything, right? From door access systems, security cameras to IV pumps in hospitals and occupancy sensors in rooms and air quality sensors and everything, right? And especially in this post-pandemic world, we see a lot of customers doing things with smart building technologies around smart lighting and again air quality monitoring and occupancy monitoring to discover people density and those sorts of things. All of that needs network connectivity, and so we've got to provide that network connectivity, but ensure that those devices don't become a vector of compromise into the network, especially into some portion of the network that might allow somewhat easier access to the data, right? So, um, dealing with that new world of OT and IoT has been a big trend that we've seen. And we've seen a lot of the vendors, including the SASE and SASE vendors, the next generation firewall and security vendors, network access control vendors. All of them are looking at how do we identify, classify, and apply policy to OT and IoT devices, because again, that world's just not going away, right? We're continually connecting more and more.
Right. That makes sense. And I want to talk about two things. Like, one is you keep mentioning SSE and SASE, and for the folks that are on the line that may not be familiar with these concepts, can you at a high level just go over them? And then I have a question around IoT and OT environments.
Right. Yeah. Sure. So SASE, the Secure Access Service Edge, and SSE, the Secure Service Edge, are two closely linked concepts. Right. They were both terms that were defined by Gartner over the last few years, and the line between them has really started to blur over time. But the whole concept of whether we say SASE or SSE is using a cloud delivered, sort of ubiquitously accessible platform for providing cloud delivered network access control and security, and that zero trust network access, that ZTNA aspect, right? So it enables the policy application to traffic from a user, whether they're working on a mobile device or a laptop, whether they're in an office setting, in a corporate office, or working remotely or working from the road, to get the same access experience, the same user experience, and the same security policy experience, no matter where they are or what device they're using. And that's really only possible through sort of a globally deployed cloud delivered service. And that's what the SASE and SSE vendors provide for us. So it's really that idea of policy following the user
Sure.
everywhere to ensure that once that user has validated who they are, and that they have that they're authorized to try to take some action, and once we validate that the device is one that's not actively being compromised and that sort of thing, that we can then provide that user that least privileged minimum necessary access for them to be able to do their job for that specific action, whatever that action is.
Right. And that's interesting. And we do have to give Gartner some credit here because, when I think of SASE, I think of the convergence of identity, network, and security. Right. And all
Absolutely.
three of those elements need to work in concert to deliver what you just described. And Gartner has definitely facilitated our ability to define these things. Right. And although not always perfect, but helpful enough for us to look at it from a holistic perspective and say, okay, what do I need from a SASE element? What are the key elements of SASE? And you and I often talk about things that aren't defined by Gartner that we believe should still be part of, what a SASE SSE architecture is,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and those are important as well. Which is, the value of the integrator there is just sort of bridging those gaps. So from a SSE SASE perspective, I think that's a good understanding of, hey, what is SASE, right? We're at home. It doesn't make sense for us to backhaul traffic through a data center to access the resources in the cloud, for example, right? So having a comprehensive coverage from a next-gen security perspective, regardless of cloud, is critical, to sort of achieving that. What would you say that if you look at the acronym SSE and SASE, SD-WAN is what's missing there, right? Because there's this concept of single vendor SASE versus SSE platform, right? And the difference between the two is SASE includes SD-WAN, and Gartner removed the SD-WAN element to redefine SSE, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I often joke that the A in SASE stands for SD-WAN, which um, so I mean, but it
Right.
stands for access, right? And yeah, so the
Right.
original SASE definition, which is the one Gartner came out with in sort of like fall of 2020, right before the pandemic hit, which was it actually became very useful to have a framework to talk about these things,
Right.
right when everybody suddenly had to work from home. But the difference there was that model originally included SD-WAN, software defined WAN, as part of the model. But what we've seen in this new hybrid remote work world, where often just as many, if not more, of the employees in an enterprise setting are not at a corporate office location at any given time. It's been less important to worry about how are we defining that office to office or office to data center connectivity. And so as a result, SSE typically even provides some of that connectivity, right, through private application access, application specific tunnels and connection brokering, so that we're not specifically worried per se about what that connectivity is, right? So an office might just have connectivity to the internet. And we might still want what I like to call software defined internet, meaning some sort of intelligent edge platform that can maybe take advantage of redundancy or link aggregation across multiple internet
Mhm.
connections. But we don't necessarily need tunnels from all the offices to each other and to the data centers, and to the cloud environments, because we're really funneling all the traffic into that SSE cloud and then steering it to its appropriate destination once we've run it through that policy engine and validated, the who, what, why, where, when, and how, right? So yeah, so that's kind of the difference, right? And that's why I said the lines blended a little bit because yes, there's plenty of networking vendors out there that provide an SD-WAN platform that's either directly integrated to their SASE solution, or is maybe kind of a little bit of a bolt-on, right? They're maybe part of a similar product portfolio, but not necessarily super integrated. But you can get a lot of the same benefit, even if you don't have a strong need for SD-WAN,
Right.
and then it just kind of turns into SSE.
That's
So
perfect.
yeah, the definition has evolved over
Right.
time, and again, I think that line is blended.
And it's continued to evolve. It's going to continue to evolve. But I also want to
Absolutely.
key in on another thing that you said that sort of proves that you know where you categorize things is very elusive from a zero trust perspective, because you mentioned IoT, right, and having sort of proper visibility governance across all the different assets, right, and Gartner has also defined that sort of area as cyber asset attack surface management, right? So do we have proper visibility in what we own, right? Which is so critical, right? So when you look at the zero trust principles, the conversation was framed around network, but we quickly pivoted to governance, visibility, and analytics so that we have better
Mhm.
understanding of what it is we're securing in the first place, right? And do we have that proper visibility, and do we not? And for those that aren't aware of cyber asset attack surface management, is really there are a couple players that are aggregating data in your environment from various management sources and allowing you to query that data to quickly find out what the device is, and then sort of aggregate the perspective from all the tools that know about that device into one line, and also for you to query it and find out what's running where, why, etc. Right. So part of
Yeah. Well, and that inventory and
yeah,
asset visibility is so important, right? Because how else do you build a security baseline
right,
to identify when something anomalous is happening if you don't know? I mean, you have to know what normal looks like. And part of knowing what normal looks like is a matter of knowing what has access to your environment, right? And again, where we have network presence within our corporate locations, data centers, we have to know what is on those networks. And to your point, that's where a lot of these, the NAC platforms and
hmm
the asset management platforms are focused around ensuring that we've got an accurate inventory, an accurate CMDB, just so that we know what we have,
right,
and once we know what we have and how things are classified, that enables us to help build security baselines and look for anomalous behavior.
okay. So, and we have a question coming in. Right. So the question is, what are some of the greatest challenges you have seen businesses try to tackle as they evolve their security post-pandemic? That's a good one. I have my perspective, but by all means, Bob.
Yeah, one of those big challenges I think has been sort of this simultaneous move toward this largely hybrid workforce, right? I mean, I think we're not necessarily, a huge fully remote workforce at this point, but we continue to see a lot of hybrid work, and I think we will continue to see that for, um, I would like to think forever, because I think we've proven it can work, but that mixed with just sort of like the exponential explosion into the public cloud. I've seen that be a big challenge as
Right.
we now have to worry about how do we connect all of these hybrid users who again may be in an office or may be working from
Right.
home or working from the beach at any given day,
Hmm.
to like this like dusting of applications that's now out all over the place. So we kind of had the double whammy of not only are all the applications moving
Right.
where they live, and in some cases migrating on maybe on a periodic basis where they are actually based, but the users and their devices are as well. So to me, I think that's been one of the biggest challenges that customers had to deal with from a connectivity and network security perspective. But yeah, interested in your thoughts, Felix, on
I mean,
sort of the broader sort of governance and all that kind of good stuff.
right. I mean, I couldn't, sort of align more with what you just said. I will add that as part of that transformation, what we've seen is an increase in the number of vendors and tools that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 76 is the average number of tools from a cybersecurity perspective that organizations have. Now, the definition of what a cybersecurity tool is largely changing, right? And so there are a lot of practically every tool is a cybersecurity tool now, but 76 is a lot, right? So
True.
if you think about when the pandemic hit, like I said previously, we went from 5% work from home to 60% work from home, and we didn't really have the mechanism of providing adequate security for these remote workers. Right, we plugged holes in our security policy to facilitate productivity. And so now what we're seeing is an increase in not only complexity, right, but our
Mhm.
ability to manage people process to operationalize these solutions that are set out to solve these challenges, right? So there's a couple things, right? Immediately, exactly what you're saying, but then the other piece was, all right, now we have a lot of new, DSPM, CSPM, a lot of cloud focused tools. How do we embed those into our people process to achieve the outcome that we need? Right? Just because you purchased a tool doesn't mean that you've solved a problem, right? That just means that you have a tool that you need to operationalize in order to solve the outcome. And I think that's been a lot of the conversation. I think when I talk to customers and I say zero trust important to you, I think the answer is always yes, right? It is important. The concern is how do we get there in a crawl, walk,
Mhm.
run way that keeps in mind what our existing investments are, right, and how we're going to go from point A to point B. So
Right.
there are two sort of ways to answer that question. I appreciate the question. Thank you. And what I wanted to ask you was previously you talked about like we're on network, right? So let's just double click because I feel passionately about what I'm about to say, right? So we've been talking about SASE because SASE is probably governs most of my conversations, around how do we operationalize SASE? Where does it fit in? How can CDI help? But there's also NAC as part of it, right? There's
Mhm.
also micro-segmentation that's part of it, which micro-segmentation is a term that we've heard of for decades, right? That depending on who you're talking to may not be something that they're able to achieve, not because it's not a good idea, but if you look at the priority of things that we have to sort of address from a cybersecurity perspective, that may not be the on the top of the list, right?
Mhm.
Where do you see micro-segmentation today in conversations, right? And before I ask that, let me just define that for folks that don't know, right? So we've been talking about end user access to backend resources from a SASE perspective, right? Um, there is also a conversation of zero trust from the perspective of I have a VM environment in my environment that should only talk to this VM via these ports and protocols. How do I govern that and only allow the communication that should happen between those two systems in a way that it doesn't affect people process or get to a point where it's too much for us to handle. So micro segmentation is more system to system communication, whereas SASE is more end user to system communication. So from your perspective, Bob, is microseg still relevant? Are we still looking to address microseg?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is, and part of the reason for that is, like I mentioned earlier, zero trust is really about protecting the access to the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, one of the key principles of a zero trust approach is to assume breach, right? So we can't and enforce least privilege access, right? So how can we not implement micro-segmentation, down to specific processes that need to be able to talk to one another within an application or a data center environment? How can we not do that if we are assuming that every asset may have been breached and also trying to implement least privileged access to the data, right, or to the system? So it absolutely is still relevant. One thing that I think we're seeing a shift in is the move toward more agent-based microsegmentation platforms. Um, it's something that we've tried to solve through the network for a long
Right.
time, right? And you've
Right.
got software-defined network solutions like Cisco ACI and VMware NSX, and
Mm-hmm.
and a few others that try to enforce that microsegmentation from the network's perspective. The problem there is you're still operating mostly an important protocol kind of perspective, and it's very computationally expensive to provide, sort of deep inspection that would determine what kind of application or process might be running. The agent-based microsegmentation solutions are typically providing process to process, or at least source process based security policy, right? So that's been the big shift that I've seen there.
Okay, that makes sense. And there's a question that came in, around, what are the common gotchas from a SASE perspective, and what are some of the challenges, right? And I was just on a call where we were discussing this, right? And zero trust maturity is a big challenge because it's nice enough to say what we're saying. Hey, we want verify explicitly, assume breach, we want least privilege access, but understanding who needs to access what is a challenge, right? And us being able to say, well, here's a subset of end users that should only have access to these resources on the back end. And before they can have access to those resources, we need to do a posture check and make sure that the risk score on their endpoint is in line with enterprise requirements, right? And so getting to that process is, I think, that the challenge, and that's where there are certain vendors that have invested a lot of time and R&D in facilitating that process, so that we're able to uncover who's accessing what in a more dynamic way, so that we can auto create those policies. But I would say that if you just deploy a zero trust sort of multi-vendor solution, you may still miss that part, right? Even if you thought about the architecture and understanding where identity fits in, understanding where the device fits in, are we increasing our zero trust maturity over time and getting closer to those principles that we defined at the initially in the conversation?
Yeah. Well, see, I think part of the challenge there is that, again, zero trust is such a broad,
Mm-hmm.
it's a viewpoint, right? It's a methodology of looking at how you build infrastructure, how you build applications, and how you enable user access to those applications, right? There's no one product out there that's got that full view of everything. So at some point, you've got to take what we can see over here as part of the network, and what we can see over here as part of application behavior, and what we can see down here
Right.
as part of endpoint behavior. And we need to correlate all that, and we need to use that to help drive decisions. And that's where I think, when we start talking about security, orchestration, automation, and AI SecOps, I think that's where all that comes back together, because we've got to start to take all that just mountain of related but not directly relatable data,
Right.
and figure out how to make it actionable, and identify when something's going on, so that we can actually react to it, as opposed to just look at it in the rearview mirror and say, oh, well, here's what happened, right? Nobody wants that forensic view. Everybody wants that ability to stop an attack either before it occurs, ideally, right? See those indicators, those signs that something's going on, or at least proactively halt that attack while it's in process, right? And so
Right.
that's where
Right.
I think the need for orchestration, automation, and AI comes in as part of the zero trust conversation. Would you
Agreed,
agree?
agreed. No,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that, part of the challenge and an important point to make is that there is a consolidation element to this, right? Every sort of environment that I walk into, when you think about how we define, zero trust or SASE, let's just stick to SASE, so that's something sort of tangible that we can discuss. There is always a consolidation play. Like you might have a VPN solution, right? You may have a SWIG, right? You may have a firewall. You may have an EDR solution. You obviously have identity as well, right? There might be CASB that you have out there. And I know I'm throwing a lot of acronyms, right? We don't have time to define all of them, but there are all these things that we're sort of consolidating, right? In order to be able to achieve what you're referencing. Because otherwise it's very manual. It's a very manual sort of process. And I'm a firm believer in making sure that as we're acquiring new tools, that we're paying close attention to how they integrate to the existing tools that we have and what that roadmap looks like from an alignment perspective. And where I see a lot of SASE vendors doing very well is providing solutions that are maybe not necessarily best of breed for that particular area. Like you may not have the best DLP platform out there, but it's good enough and it's part of an ecosystem that we can sort of manage and orchestrate to get closer to the outcome. Because otherwise, what you have is a bunch of point tools, right? And they're all sort of working independently of each other. And we're at a point in cybersecurity where we can't afford to have as much complexity as possible. I think that I've been a part of a lot of talks where people are like, well, let's decrease the number of tools, and every organization that I've talked to that has tried to do that hasn't done it, right? And I think more than decreasing a tool, we need to understand what the integration quotient is for these tools and what we can actually achieve by integrating and maybe sort of standardizing a bit on some of these sort of vendor solutions.
Yeah, and what pieces might be part of really like a platform as opposed to a point solution, right? Because, like you said, every tool that's in use was put there for a reason, right?
Right.
It's not real often that you run into just like literal overlap of, oh yeah, we have two tools to do the exact same thing, right? The reason that somebody's got two tools or 76 tools deployed is because each one brings something to the table. So I think it's not necessarily reducing the number, but it's forming those, finding opportunities to consolidate those into a platform that, to your point, might be a little bit easier to manage or a little bit easier to integrate with a smaller number of other platforms in order to try to, just reduce the sheer volume of information, alerts, and data, and everything else that we're seeing. So
right. And there's a question that came in around where do we start from a SASE perspective? I get this question a lot, right? And there are a couple of things. I think when we're thinking of adopting SASE, there's a lot of work associated with the process, but there's low hanging fruit elements, right? I think that one of the most overlooked low hanging fruit elements of a SASE solution is out of band CASB. Out of band CASB provides a way for you to gain visibility, maybe establish some level of DLP where we're reporting back to a SIMSOC type of platform without really changing people process, right? Like we instantly gain that visibility of who has access to what cloud-based resources. And for those that aren't familiar with CASB, what I'm referring to is Cloud Access Security Broker, which is an element of SASE, and it's sort of the value prop is decreasing and having better control of the applications that reside in the internet and understanding who has access to what, and maybe start getting closer to DLP policies and having some level of governance around the data itself, right? So I think that's a low-hanging fruit element, because when I think of where to start, I think of where is the least user disruption, right? Where does that exist? Can we get some quick wins without disrupting the end user? We don't want to disrupt the end user, right? And then as we progress, I think internet access is critical also, right? Mm-hmm. Is saying we have private access and internet access. We have resources that reside in the cloud, like I mentioned, right? And to your point earlier, you did a great job of framing this up, right? Having comprehensive next generation security features regardless of cloud, right? So that we don't have to backhaul to the data center. I think that is a very sort of logical place to start is, hey, internet access, right? And then sort of maybe then progressing to private access.
Yeah,
Thoughts
there's
on that, Bob?
one other place that I
Yeah,
think people often overlook that can be
yeah.
valuable as well, which is that remote access for unmanaged devices into specific applications. I'm hoping you kind of picked up my code, my code words there. But
Yeah,
think the HVAC vendor or the some
right.
sort of contractor
Typical.
vendor that traditionally, what did we do?
Hmm.
We provided them with an open RDP port that they would hit, right? Or they had a little firewall sitting somewhere in the data center that had that stretched out a VPN to some remote location that we didn't have any administrative access to, right? So that somebody could RDP or SSH or whatever into some sort of device that they managed. That's an opportunity to replace that connectivity with a SASE based solution to provide basically proxied access for those applications where you can now apply some level of identity management, multi-factor authentication, limited access. And that's because, I mean, you think about a lot of the big breaches, right? Especially the big like retail breaches, the Targets and all those. It's almost always been through one of those vectors, right? Somebody managed to get into an HVAC control system and then traverse
Hmm.
from there. So, I see so many networks I look at that just have all these little pinholes for contractors and vendors and support
Right.
personnel. I think that's another good opportunity. That's not You don't have to worry about migrating 100,000 users to a new way of accessing their applications, but you can close up a lot of those little holes in the dam. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. And it just, it's perfect because I had a customer who's, we asked me the same question and we went down the, hey, out of band CASB, secure internet access route. And, their biggest challenge was, hey, we have resources that are in China that need access to systems that, are in our data center. So how do we get those individuals off the network? Right. So that at that point, it was more private access. Right. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
we started to sort of, solve for that challenge to say, hey, let's make sure that those individuals are off the network. They only have access to what they need, like all the sort of the guiding principles from a zero trust perspective, right? Verify explicitly, assume breach, least privilege access for those the higher risk type of third party resources that are necessary
Exactly.
to do many things in your organization, right?
Yep.
So that makes a lot of sense. We do have one other question here on how can CDI help? Thank you for that softball. I don't know who provided that, but there's a lot of ways that we can help. So one of the things that as part of my job role is to develop a services catalog. And for those that don't know, CDI does have a comprehensive portfolio of advisory cybersecurity services. We do pen testing, we do gap assessments, we do risk assessments, we do impact analysis, business impact analysis. Projects. So there's a lot there, right? So we can certainly do that. One of the things that is fairly new is we do have a zero trust gap assessment where we can come in and it's an interview-based type of conversation based on CISA 2.0 guidance, where we can help uncover where you are today from a zero trust perspective across the seven categories that I described earlier, where you want to be, and collaborate on an action plan around how to get there. We also have what we call making sense of presentations and sort of workshops where we can help decrease the amount of time it would take you to select the right vendor. If you think about, take SASE, for example, there are a lot of different vendors that are providing SASE solutions. There's micro-segmentation. There's a lot of different vendors that are providing agent-based solutions, hypervisor-based solutions. What makes the most sense for you? In a non-billable way, right? These are all free workshops where we could sort of bring in the knowledge that we have comprehensively across all the different accounts that we work with to help decrease the time of vendor selection, and also focusing on what existing tools you have today, what vendor integrates best with those tools, and getting closer to that outcome. We also have professional services to help implement and integrate these tools, as well as managed services to help you manage them over time. So that's a very quick way of answering how CDI can help. I don't know, Bob, if you have
That's a
anything
lot. That's a
to
lot of stuff we can do, Felix.
that's a, that's a
No,
lot that
thanks
we
for
can do.
calling out the making sense of
Yeah.
presentations, right? Because that's actually
Yes.
material that myself, my team, and the rest of the entire solution architecture organization at CDI is responsible for developing and then delivering, right? So that's a great opportunity for us to help customers, whittle down some of that, just overwhelming amount of information in the marketplace, and help customers get down to just understand, what is this buzzwordy topic that we hear about, whether it's SASE or
Right.
micro-segmentation or NAC or hyperconvergence or anything else, right? And how do we figure out who we should maybe really start to look at as a potential vendor solution? And so we love producing that material and then delivering it to customers. So thanks for calling
Excellent.
that out. But
Excellent.
yeah.
And with that, I think this is coming to an end. But I did want to thank you, Bob, for joining. I know that getting on camera on a live setting is not easy for most. But you are a true professional as it relates to this. You came prepared with the. I had never seen that before. There's the mic. So Bob is the best of the business here. So we appreciate. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for the questions. That's really helpful, right? As we're sort of going through these presentations and as we're building to sort of looking to build community, is to have some sort of interaction around questions that are coming in. I will say that this is the last CDI Live that we're going to do this calendar year. We are going to start in the new calendar year, and the focus there will be around CDI security go-to-market, as well as all the things that CDI can provide. I obviously represent a cybersecurity business, but there will be a focus on data intelligence as well as zero trust and what we call contextual response. To sort of help get to those security outcomes and decrease mean time to detection and mean time to response. And so the very next one that we have may be focused on data, right, in general, and observability in cybersecurity, which is also a key element to SASE. As well, is making sure that we have visibility into what we're doing. We have proper context, not only from a support perspective, but a SIM SOC perspective as well. So lots of good stuff coming in the new year. Happy holidays, everyone. Like I said, thank you, Bob. Hopefully this was helpful to most. And if you have questions that weren't answered, please send them out to your account manager. And if you don't have one, you can direct them to me. You can direct them to Bob. Also follow us on LinkedIn as well as YouTube, so that you get access to the latest information about what we're doing and what we're up to. And with that, thanks everyone for joining. Looking forward to the next one.